I believe so.
Yes. Okay, yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody.
Bring us in. Yeah.
Welcome to the June 2nd County Commissioners Workshop meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will become part of public record. Anyone wishing to comment, please use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen, and if the chairman allows, we'll bring you in.
Thank you, Dawn, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Wednesday afternoon workshop. We have with us Lori Crawford from the Lebanon Valley Conservancy and some of her board members. And I'm assuming that Lori will be starting and proceeding with introductions and with the presentation.
Yes. Can you see me? I'm not sure
No,
I don't have a way to turn on my video. You asked me to unmute, so I was able to unmute, but I don't see where I can choose to turn it on. So
there's a little movie camera in the bottom left with a line through it. If you click on that, it turns on. At least on my screen.
You have a pop-up camera?
You have a pop-up camera on your monitor?
yeah, I have a camera on my monitor.
Okay.
Well, we'll have to
Right. Well,
persevere without the video. How's that?
okay. Okay. Yeah, so I put together a, to introduce, John Schock is with us. He is our board president this year. John assists with a lot of the garden projects downtown and has started to get involved in some of our land protection work. So I invited him to this meeting, as well as Rich Raiders, who is the counsel for TLVC and will be working with Tom Long in regards to the grant of conservation easement. So I thank you both for joining us as well. And thank you to the commissioners for having us, of course, and for this great conversation about land protection at Camp Shand. So the packets I dropped off, I'm not going to go through each of those items, but the first one in the packet is our baseline documentation. So that is the documents that the Conservancy does on site. We did a site visit on April 22nd with 3 of our board members where we walked the property. Jamie joined us and Christine joined us as well. And we were able to walk the property, try and get a good idea of the area that is outside of the bog turtle easement. We cannot put an easement on an easement, so the Conservancy would just be looking to preserve the additional, I believe, 66 acres that are outside the bog turtle easement. So we did that baseline documentation, and I included a copy of that for your review. Also included is the environmental assessment, which was completed by George Gress. He is a land steward for the Nature Conservancy, serves on our board. And he and Jim Logan were on site a few weeks later to do more of an environmental assessment. So they looked at stream health. They did a lot of identification of plants. We did take note of a few invasives, but as a whole, the forest seemed very healthy. George was excited about the age of the trees and the diversity of the trees, as well as the deer browse seemed to be limited, would be some of the highlights of the environmental assessment. So I included a copy of that with some of the photos that George had taken just to baseline. We did also find some putty root, which was a unique species of plant identified in that area. So Christine was able to show it to us, and it's pretty exciting. Between the bog turtles and the putty root, it was a big day for environmental assessment that day. So I included those 2 documents. Also in your packet is the forest stewardship plan. So that plan is over 10 years old. I did talk to the state forester about it, and his recommendation was to supply an updated forest stewardship plan. We typically do conservation plans when we're preserving agricultural land, and we try to do forest stewardship plans for projects involving the forest so that we can keep the management expectations clear between the landowner and the Conservancy. So with that recommendation, I did ask him for a price to update it, and the quote that I got from Dowling Forestry, which is a private contractor recommended from the state forester, is $3,800. You would be welcome to find someone that you felt suitable to do the forest stewardship plan. But what's nice is it's good for 10 years, gives us an idea of the future of the different areas of the property. And so I thought it was helpful to see the original forest stewardship plan, and also to know that it could be updated. So as we're considering the project and some of the costs that come along with some of this preservation work, the forest stewardship plan update would be $3,800. The Conservancy doesn't typically pay for this just because we do not have the funding for those kind of costs. So I'm putting that back as a discussion if you have any questions about that.
Commissioner Litz.
Yes, Lori, I don't know if you're familiar with this woman, but she used to be at the Conservation District. Lee Beamersturfer was a forester for us.
Okay.
I wondered what she's doing these days, if she had any interest in helping with the stewardship plan. It was just something that popped in my head. Maybe no one has interest in that, but I thought I'd put it on the table.
Okay. I will call them and see if they have any information for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did have a question also. I believe there is a survey of the property that was completed as part of the purchase. Is that true?
No, we didn't have a survey conducted. I think the deed was good enough to go with.
Okay. Okay.
Physical survey is very expensive, that kind of property.
Yes. Yes. We've been finding that we've had to do some surveys on the last two projects that we did. So I will check with the board about whether that would be required or not. Also then included in the packet is the stewardship covenant. So the Conservancy has an endowment fund. This is a restricted account that we take funds in each time we take on a conservation easement so that we have money reserved for the defense of the easement. So for each project, we ask the landowner to contribute money towards this endowment. It is invested with RBC Investments. We do not use it for any other purpose except to save it in case of a challenge of the easement. Luckily, we have not had to use any of this funding, and it is invested, so it continues to grow. It's very important in grant work that we have an endowment. Many of the grants that we try to, especially the federal grants, the stewardship fund is very important. Where we come up with the money is based on acreage. So we take the lead from We Conserve PA, which is the PA Land Trust Association, and they have a formula based on acreage, which is where the $7,600 comes from that is on that stewardship covenant. So again,
Lori,
yes,
is that once and done?
it is a once and done. Yes. So it's a one-time gift. We usually collect it at closing and then we deposit into our endowment fund. Some people have trouble with the amount. So we've also made adjustments. Sometimes people do it over a few years if that's needed or something like that. But yes, it's a one-time gift that we ask the landowner to invest in. So, so I ask you to consider that gift and how and answer any questions about its importance or anything like that.
We will have to discuss the financial side of this thing, and
Absolutely.
maybe there'll be a recommendation coming from
Yep.
the commissioners. Okay.
Okay. All right.
I'm kind of amazed at how expensive it is to be generous.
It is true. It is true. You can see what an uphill battle it is for the Conservancy when land is donated, when easements are donated to us and we have to ask the landowner for money. It has been challenging over the years. It's one of our biggest hurdles. But we also, take land protection very seriously and understand that, just even in Chester County and, in our local counties surrounding ours, there has been challenges to these easements. People think they can put up homes or that they can subdivide out just the tiny corner. And so we know how important it is to collect that money. So we do have an opportunity to get money back from the PA Land Trust Association for some of the closing costs associated with this, and as well as the survey. So So we do try, the Conservancy does try to find grant funding to assist in that. So, so something like the survey, if that would become something that the board feels is important, that can be something that is covered with grant funding. But the forest stewardship plan and the endowment is not something that we can grant fundraise. So.
Commissioner.
Yes, thank you, sir. Do you plan on doing like annual inspections, or do you do aerial photography, new aerial photography? How do you go about, I don't know, making sure no one is squatting, things like that?
Yes, yes, it's a great question. So the Conservancy does annual inspections. We actually are doing ours tomorrow on our other 11 properties. We typically do them in June. We send out letters in May letting all the landowners know that we're coming on site so that we don't surprise anyone. We also asked if there's been any changes based on their easement documents to the land. And then we do walk on site. We do not take aerial photographs at this point. Most of the properties we're able to walk, and we find volunteers to assist in that. Some of our larger properties are 100 acres or so, and you're able to drive through the properties. So, but we do inspect them. We make sure that all the easement restrictions are kept in place, and then we send follow-up letters if there's anything that has not been followed. Sometimes it's been as simple as signs being up, because that's part of the program as well, that there is a sign on the property so that we can share the good news of conservation. People can understand the importance of that. But we haven't had any major violations, but we do complete annual inspections typically in June. So we would do that the same at Camp Shand.
Thank you. And I'm paralleling what I know about the agriculture preservation easements. So the other question that comes to my mind is, indeed, do we have a way of, not along with those inspections, my doorbell just rang and it threw me off, I'm sorry. If I don't plan on selling this, but the three of us will not be here forever. If somebody gets a brainy idea that they're going to sell it and they try and drop the easement, do you have a way of monitoring and flagging and making sure that those easements stay on the property?
Yes, so these easements are in perpetuity, so they are forever. Many of our easements are currently in second and third ownership, so it runs with the deed. It will in this case as well. And so typically when the land is going to be sold, someone calls the Conservancy about 30 days before, just so we can make sure that the document is included in the deed when it gets transferred, as well as so that we can get to know the new owners. So the new owners will then take over the responsibility. They'll become our new contact for yearly inspections, make sure that they understand all that was outlined in that. When we look at the draft easement that I've also included in your packet, there are 3 protection areas that I want to talk about. And in those will be kind of how you can change the easement, but you won't be able to remove the easement. So it doesn't matter if we are 500 years from now, the easement will forever sit with the deed of Camp Shand. And yes, Rich.
Counselor.
Yes, good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for your time this afternoon. As Mr. Wogelmuth could explain to you in gruesome detail, these easements obviously are recorded and would show up in the title search, and anybody who's attempted to make a closing on this property would have to address that easement going forward. And if they wanted to challenge the easement, then they would have to raise the issue in court. Otherwise, it just runs with the land forever, and subsequent owners would just have to go along with it because that's just the way the law is. Even to the point of condemnation, that if somebody wanted to condemn the property, then they would have to petition the orphans court for permission to disturb the easement in a condemnation action. Thank you.
Thank you. And you mentioned that you have 8 or 9 other properties. How many acres does that comprise?
We have not just under 1,000 acres with 11 different properties.
So this is a big deal, adding 6.
66 is significant for us. Yes, yes. And it's in an area where we don't have a lot of land protected. So we always look for corridors of protection, and it's nice to get a property where we might be able to preserve other large areas that are adjacent to it. We have Chuck Henry's property across from Phil Haven is one of our other properties, kind of in the Highlands region, same kind of hillside as Camp Shand. And we've always, been outreaching to his neighbors to try and make some more corridors, especially for things like habitat and birds and other animals that live in the pockets of forested areas, especially in the Highlands. So yes. So it would be significant. It would take us over 1,000, which is exciting for us. I think we're at 982. So it would take us over 1,000, which is a huge milestone for us. And, I'm proud, at the Conservancy at its 20th anniversary now this is such a significant project to work with all of you in the county to do a project as well. So.
Great.
Commissioner,
Yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
while we're on the subject of deeds, this is probably a question for Rich, but I know that under farmland preservation easements, there are some things that are allowed to, that the property can be used for. In other words, I think that some utilities can traverse the property. I know of occasions where forced sewer mains have been run across, farmland that was preserved. Is that the same with this? Is there anything that is, that is allowed, and if it were undesirable, then the Conservancy or the landowner would have to object?
Depends on the protection area. In the highest protection area, the answer is substantially no. There's really not going to be much of anything allowed. And if somebody wants to do something like that, then they'll have to go to the Orphans Court to petition permission for that, because the conservation easements are the purview of the Orphans Court. In a minimal protection area, there are certain allowances that can be used as long as they're approved by the Conservancy. So there is a petition process for that in a minimal or a standard protection area. The standards for approving such a thing in a standard protection area are obviously higher than they would be in a minimal protection area. And I think what the Conservancy would be looking for in a minimal protection area would be just making sure that everything was put back the way it should have been. In a standard protection area, it's like, what recourse do you have? If this were to go to the Orphans Court, the criteria under Section 208 of the Eminent Domain Code is that the condemnor or the offer of the other easement will have to demonstrate that this is their best option, and they have to convince the court that they don't have another way around.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so it starts from zero, essentially. There's, it's zero allowed unless a case is made for it, and then it's up to the court.
And it depends on what level of protection we're talking about, because as I mentioned, in the minimal protection areas, it's just a matter of come to the Conservancy and have a review. In the higher protection areas, then you're correct, that we'll go to court.
And what are we, what's this going to be considered when it's?
Some of each.
Pardon me?
Some of each.
Some of each. Okay.
And if Lori or John wants to talk about the details of what areas would be under which protection.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, the reality, there's a power line adjacent to this, right next to it. So I don't know whether, in the future, there would be need for more of that and how that would behave 100 years, for 50 years from now.
Well, you have existing easements on this property already from Med-Ed, from, I guess, Verizon at this point is the inheriting company from the old Ma Bell. And obviously you can't disturb those easements. And if they want to utilize their existing easements for additional services without having to do any land, we would never have that discussion, because that's their right to utilize their easements to see that as they see fit. Right. If they expand the easement beyond their current boundaries, that's the discussion you're getting into.
Okay, thank you.
And the Conservancy's easement is a lot about impervious space. So building structures and changing the land, not so much running wires in the land and some of those kind of things. But talking about the protection areas, I did include the draft of conservation easement. This is a document that we both work on. So you would include items in this. We would provide some protection maps for the different protection areas, the minimal, the standard, and the highest protection. So the camp area that includes the home and the kitchen area and the barn and things like that, all of that would fall under a minimal protection area. So again, those structures can be manipulated and changed if you needed to add on. It's really just a conversation that you would write to us. We have some landowners who took a barn and added on, like a milking parlor. But it was all within the minimal protection area. Then we had, but like Rich said, that forested area on that, when you start going up the ridge towards the horseshoe trail, that would all be highest protection. So there would be no structures allowed to be built in that highest protection area. It's such a valuable wetland area as well above where the bog turtle is. So I don't see that it is a big area for construction anyway, as we're manipulating this contract and trying to figure out which protection area each of these should be in. We know that that's the best conservation value is that forested land. And so we definitely would want that to be in highest protection, especially because there's a stream there as well. So we'll be protecting the watershed. And those, that's what we care about the most. As far as the minimal protection, we obviously don't want you to subdivide it and start putting a bunch of septic systems in, but ultimately, if you're changing some of the structures to make camp more accessible, or if camp, gets bigger and bigger each year, it would be important to make sure that those changes could be allowed. So as Rich and Tom and all of you work through that contract, we would add the maps in as our recommendation, but that can be changed as well. So our next step after this would be to develop some of those maps for you and send them over so that you can see what we were thinking as far as the protection areas. So,
Yeah,
and
so-
then those are included then with the easement, those pictures.
Okay. As I mentioned before, Phil Tipton from the YMCA he's in the audience, so to speak, watching, but that potentially that would be something that we'd want to, not potentially, we definitely want to bring them to the table to talk about that and make sure that, what's existing is what everybody understands. And because we do have a 99-year lease with them to function as a camp.
Go ahead, Rich.
And we would invite that because part of this exercise is going through the crystal ball view of what they think their needs might be going forward as best as we can identify them now and make sure that we don't stomp on things that we kind of know are coming and are suitable for what the land is intended for.
Okay.
All right, Lori.
It's important to mention the draft grant of conservation easement comes from We Conserve PA, which is the PA Land Trust Association. So because we are a member with them, we work collectively so that their lawyers have reviewed this. It gets reviewed and updated almost yearly. So this is the newest version in 2020. So I just wanted you to understand where this document comes from. It comes from them, and then it's customized for each land trust across Pennsylvania. It also gives some consistency too from Conservancy to Conservancy so that we're using some of the same language and some of the same protection across the state to give it more staying power. So that's where it came from. I did send Tom a draft of this as well a few months ago. So this is something that you will give your input and he will send it to Rich and we go back and forth. We're currently working with a landowner in the same capacity. Rich drafted it up. We sent it over to her. She's been reviewing it. She made a few changes that she preferred. She's protecting some bog turtle, but she also has some grazing on her land. So she changed some wording to allow for her own activities. So this would be similar as far as camp activities and using Phil and his input as far as future camp activities. And we go back and forth with that. I would just ask that if you consider the cost that's associated with it, and we would want you to, we would want to collectively agree to that before we would move forward with something like a survey. The survey will be cost that comes out of the Conservancy, and while it is reimbursable through a grant, if the easement does not go through, the Conservancy does not get that money back. So I want to make sure that you all kind of vote on it and we know that we're moving forward before we would move forward with the survey. But those would be kind of our next steps from here would be the survey, for you to review the draft easement, and for us to provide the protection maps so that we could talk more about all the different protection areas to meet both of our needs.
Amy.
So a survey is always a matter of course.
It usually is. So I want, since have the title search. I'm inclined to share with the board at our June 14th meeting that, you didn't feel that it was needed based on the title work, and they might vote that it's not needed.
Okay.
Rich.
Another opinion.
Yeah.
There is a board member who has an informal standard of a 1 to 200 accuracy before accepting a legal description outside of a survey. And we do have somebody who actually goes back through and replots out the legal description to see if he thinks it closes adequately. And there's been times where he thought it did. There was times where he thought it did not. And that exercise has not been done yet.
Well, the
Okay.
Conservation District has traditionally run all of our farmland preservation. They have a program, they put the coordinates in, and it either closes or it doesn't. Have you discussed it with them to see if they would provide that service?
That's not a question we've asked.
We have someone who does that. What Rich is talking about is the same deed plotter program that the Conservation District uses. So we have a board member who does that. So we just need him to execute that, and then the board decides whether the survey is required or not.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't being done manually because that would be very cumbersome on this property.
No, there's a computer program that he uses.
And commissioners, any other questions of Jamie? Panel? Not, the ball's in our court, and we thank you for bringing all this information and for all your volunteerism on behalf of our county.
Absolutely. What kind of follow-up should we expect as far as your process?
Well, I think if I could chime in there, first of all, I don't know if Phil has any questions. I'd ask him to just do a raise hand if he has anything he wanted to pitch in here. But I'll get with Tom Long. Tom can go through all of this. And I would say that commissioners, if there's anything that comes up in the course of reviewing, reviewing the covenants and so on, that Tom can get with you and just make sure there's a comfort level with it. But my guess is this is going to be a pretty straightforward easement. I mean, no one really has any plans or any thoughts of plans really other than the YMCA. And I think, what you see right now is what they intend to exist. So but we'll go through those conversations. And then if there's anything that's a hang up, Tom can talk with the board of commissioners about it.
Great.
That's
Thank you.
okay with everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, is that all right? Commissioners, good with that plan? Okay.
I'd also like to mention I am leaving the Conservancy. I invited John on this call because he may become your new contact until a new executive director has been placed. So I still plan to be in my role for the next 2 weeks and will continue to be part of the Conservancy's life here. But John will become the contact until a new executive director is in place, and then I will email you so you have all the contact information. And Rich will be here, of course, and has plenty of experience in these contracts. So
Wish you all the best, Lori.
thank you.
Okay. Anything else? I wish you all the best too, and thank you for your service. That's been a great ride for all of us that worked with you, and I know you've been involved with other parts of Conservancy throughout the county. So it's been you'll be missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time and energy. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioners, you have an executive session coming up, which we can get started a little bit early probably now. It was going to be 2:30, but tomorrow's meeting, pretty straightforward and probably briefest one we've had in a long time. I'm guessing unless something goes sideways that I don't see ahead, it'll probably be over by about 10 o'clock. We've got a hotel tax agreement, or a grant agreement. The warden has something to present with you in terms of an agreement. And I'll have an easement for between the city and the county for the John B. Wangert Memorial Park along Chestnut Street. That's city-owned land. So we're seeking an easement to be able to run the trail across it. And that's been drafted and and reviewed by all the parties. And so I'll just have John Wangert though jump in, because that's obviously that is a project very important to him. So try to keep him included in every step of the way there. So, and I think that's about all for tomorrow. Should be pretty quick.
I got a lot of links from Michelle for the next meeting. Are they
Yeah,
all the
she's
same?
find the
They
one that's
are.
for today at 2:30. But
I think she edited it. I think she
Okay.
went to change, she changed the wrong, she put the wrong date or yesterday's date.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really today's date. She did edit it, but it should be the same link.
Well, it may take me a minute to get in, so be patient.
Okay, well,
Well-
I'm not sure if she's quite ready yet anyways.
yeah, I'm not sure she knows that we're finishing up unless you said something to her.
I think
Dawn.
she's on the phone.
She's on. Okay.
Oh,
So
good. I
Well, I'm
can go
gonna
see
send you
who
a
was
packet.
at my door.
why don't we see if we can, let me see, what is it?
Let me
2:02. Let's give it another 10 minutes till she gets a hold of Peggy and
Okay.
bumps it up and all that. Okay.
Thank you.
Hey,
Hey, Bill, I'm sending your packet with Julie.
oh, you are.
Yes, I am.
No, you're very nice, but she's even nicer.
I know she is.
Jeez.
And I have to tell you, she's my favorite daughter-in-law.
Is she really?
Yep,
I guess she's probably the only one.
she is now.
Oh, jeez. All right. We'll see you
All
guys on
right.
the other side.